are taking the class for credit. Some of you have asked me how to take the surveys for your 3 additional cultural events. If you go on Canvas under assignments and scroll down to the bottom, there are 3 additional surveys that you can fill out for your cultural events. If you have questions after that, come and see me in my office or see me after class. Also, don't forget to get your attendance card scanned at the beginning of class and stay until the class ends. Okay, by way of announcement, there is an orchestra pops concert tomorrow night at 7:30 here in the Eccles Center. Should be a lot of fun. Does anybody know what we celebrate on Monday, October 12th? Any guesses? Indigenous Peoples Day. Yes, Dia de la Raza. We will be having a celebration here on campus in the GSAC from 6 to 8 p.m., celebrating the Hispanic and indigenous cultures of Latin America. We'll be having displays, food, music, and dance. It'll be a lot of fun, so everybody come on out and join us there. Now, next week we will not be having Convocation because of why? Fall break. Yes, so get outside and enjoy nature. Now, today, in honor of Cultural Diversity Day, we are going to start out with a dance performance by one of our international students. So this student is from Japan, Rutaro Maikawa. Following Taro's dance, then I'll introduce our guest speaker. So Taro, take it away.
Wondering why the red suit? Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed. This guy's got the right idea. He wore the brown pants.
How did you like that, guys? Let's give it up again for Taro. Thanks, Taro. Good job. One more time, Taro. Okay, we have some pretty talented students on this campus, wouldn't you say? If you have a talent and you would like to share it, please come and see me. We would like to showcase you, okay? So we are delighted to have with us today Franci Taylor from the University of Utah. She is currently the director of the U's American Indian Resource Center and has over 25 years of experience in American Indian education. She has served on various state and national level boards and committees on American Indian educational issues. She has also lectured at local, state, national, and international levels and has taught at the university level in both the United States and in Europe. She has participated as a member of the Indigenous Peoples Permanent Forum for the United Nations. Ms. Taylor is a member of the Choctaw tribe and has dedicated the last 25 years towards increasing access for all underrepresented students and American Indian education. Today, Ms. Taylor will talk to us about keeping our compass pointed north, diversity, inclusion, and seeing through a different lens. Please now help me join Ms. Franci Taylor, welcoming her to Snow College.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Halito, tanse, paviisiva, teheoso potahona. Oh, that's right. You guys don't speak Choctaw, do you? That's okay. Good morning, good afternoon. My name's Franci Taylor, or my real name is Gasawasikito Pa Sukisqueo. I'm not sure why I'm getting an echo, but I'm the executive director of the American Indian Resource Center, and I'm fairly new to Utah. I'm originally from Montana, and as they said, I've traveled quite a bit. I've been lucky. Nothing was done by plan. Academically, I'm an anthropologist and an archaeologist with a desire to study forensics. And yes, I am the person that sees the stray single cat hair in a shag rug. This ties into what I'm talking about, but again, and I'm also a commercial artist. I'm Choctaw and Cheyenne. I'm a traditionalist. I believe very deeply in my traditional worldviews, which frequently put me in conflict with what we call the dominant society. I think in a circular way. Sometimes this is very challenging for students that I work with, because I appear to wander off topic quite drastically. I'm absolutely not linear, but I try to come back to the point. So it can be a challenge. One of the interesting things about the human mind is that we attempt to be binary. That's why computers make sense to us, because we try to divide the world into black and white, ones and zeros. Unfortunately, even if we're looking at something like our terminology and what I'm going to be talking about with keeping our compass pointed north is about terminology. We could shorten my entire presentation to why, which is a question that I've always engaged in, and I'm going to encourage you by the end of this lecture to engage in asking why a lot. As someone once said, question everything. And I would love for you to question me. The audience is dark, but I love it when I'm doing group lectures. I usually like to have it where I'm at the same level as everyone else, so people can stop me and ask questions along the way. So I don't look at things as black and white or day and night, because if you live in this world and you've ever sat down and really observed things like a forensic anthropologist does, the world is shades of gray and light. There is never a point when anything is absolutely black or white. So we need to get out of our binary thinking, and that's where I'm trying to lead us. I'm a storyteller, which will become obvious. I've been a storyteller since I was a tiny child. It used to get me in a lot of trouble. That's why when I was in my undergraduate studies, I loved essay questions. I could dance around a question long enough that I could eke out some sort of a correct answer. Hated multiple choice, hated true and false, because I'm one of those, however. In a multiple choice, I can see how almost everything could be a correct answer, and same as in true and false. Well, this is mostly false, but it could, however, under these circumstances, be true. So this is how I view the world. I question everything. I look for subtle differences. If you come out of this with anything, please come out with the understanding that different is not bad. It is only different. I used to watch a lot of house hunting type shows, international house hunting, and was always amused when people would walk into an apartment someplace like France and complain about how weird it was because it was different. In France, that's the norm. So keep in mind that your norm and my norm may not be the same ever. I said earlier that I was a traditionalist, and I tend to view the world in very different perspective. As a traditionalist means that I have a very different concept on what is an appropriate handshake, what's the appropriate eye contact, how to tell a story, and all of these. They're not wrong. They're just different. I think in analogy and metaphor. It's the only way that I can talk. Now, having said that, when I say I'm a very traditional American Indian, and I do own a teepee, in fact, I've got a couple of them, but I also use a smartphone. I can't live without my computer. I would cease to exist without coffee. I'm absolutely bound to my car. There's no threat greater in my life than not having mobility. So saying that I'm a traditionalist does not put me in a stereotypical 1840 or something else with the concept of what it means to be a Plains Indian. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a teacher. Most of all, I'm human. I make a lot of mistakes, but I try to learn from them. At the end of the day, I hope that I'm a good friend, a good non-judgmental colleague, and a good role model. I hope I always remain curious. My childhood name was Kiotsieka, which means basically the annoying child that asks way too many questions. It was not a good thing. We were taught that we should be quiet and learn by watching. My favorite question was, why? Well, this is the way we do this. Why? I still ask that. Why? Have to turn in grades by 3 o'clock. Why? I'm not done yet. Why did they do that? I still ask that. When people, especially listening to people on Facebook or in the evening news, I'm in a constant state of, why did they do that? Not in a judgmental way, but how can I avoid what I see other people getting in trouble in if I don't understand their motivation? So I always think in terms of why, not in what is proper and normal. Normal in our world usually is divided into 2 or 3 things, and that's another big why. And there are reasons. A lot of these questions I do have answers for. Traditionally, my people divided everything into 4 because we considered things to be in balance if they were in 4s. So sometimes in a sweat lodge, you have 4 poles that enter into it, but you can also have a few more. But you only focus on that 4 because the sacred number is 4. So 4 can be 7, but it's still 4. I tend to analyze everything. If a student comes in and wants to talk, I'm in a constant stage of, what are we doing here? How can I help you? What's happening here? So in my circular way, I'm back to north. Because part of this, my title of my presentation is is about north, keeping our moral compass north. And that always confused me. My former boss, my former colleague at Washington State University, in all of our meetings said we must keep our moral compass north. And since he was from South America, I always thought this was a little bit odd. And my students have always accused me of being somewhere between Spock and Sheldon, so I spend way too much time thinking about these things. But why is north a good thing? Why is north north? These are things I would encourage you to think about. Because if you're from Montana like I am, and it's January, and it's 36 below and 3 foot of snow, south looks pretty good. Arizona is on the horizon if you live in a wintertime climate. So why do we think that north was good? And absolutely, where is north? When my people were nomadic, they always went south in the winter. So why do we have these concepts that are so deeply embedded within our psyche that we quote them without any reservation? Directions aren't really directions. We've been told they are, but, and I'm completely lost without where I am right now, but there's the sun, so we'll say this is west. So I'm right in the middle right now, and that's over there's west. But if I step a few steps in the other direction, all of those things are now different, because what was west before is now to my east. If you live in China, the United States is not the same direction. I mean, we talk about the Far East. We're the Far East to someone, no matter where we are. So these directions we use are mobile. Same thing with thinking about north. I assume we all know that we're on a ball, and on this ball it's floating in the cosmos, and we have nothing to make reference to. There is not a point of reference, like I can't say that wall's to my east. So think about being on a ball that's floating in mass space, and then tell me where north really is. Because in reality, in reference to other planets, we could be on our side. We could be pointed down compared to them. We could be at any angle. North is only north when we make it north. So why do we say, let's keep our moral compass pointed north? And why do we talk about Western civilization? Because I didn't originate from a Western civilization. So why do we have these reference points? And how do we unpack them and question them in our language? North and West is a direct response and was created as a concept during the Middle Ages and following areas of colonization and imperialization as a concept, because Northern Europe wanted to separate itself from the Southern Europe, Spain, Africa, etc. So north became a direction of goodness, south became a direction of evilness. Because Europe was west of Asia, where their spices were coming from, it became the central of civilization. And I won't even get into trying to unpack civilization, because that's another really controversial concept to me. I come from a background of primitive, uncivilized culture. We were hunters and gatherers, or collectors and hunters, as the case may be, because in all time we ate 80% more plant food than meat. So some of the things these primitive cultures gave the world, some of the things that we're seldom credited with, is 87% of all the food that's consumed on Earth today was unknown in the rest of the world prior to colonization. So this includes maize, or what we call corn, although corn is the Latin word for grain. So if you go to Europe and ask for corn, you're going to get a bowl of wheat. The technical term is maize, and that's what they call it in Europe. But corn, all but 2 beans, the soy and the mung, all of the sweet peppers and the hot peppers. When Marco Polo started the spice route, actually what he was bringing to the rest of the world, the only spice in that time was black peppercorns, black, white, and red peppercorns. So that was what spice meant. It meant pepper. But all of the sweet peppers and the hot peppers came from the Americas, as did cucumbers, potatoes. The Irish potato came from Peru. Actually, when the potato was taken to Europe, it was considered, because, a little known fact, I'm also an ethnobotanist, the potato actually is a deadly nightshade. And if a potato grows above the ground, it's poisonous, as is its leaves and its flowers and its berries, because it is part of the deadly nightshade. So when it was originally taken to Europe, the reason it became known as the Irish potato was because they used it as an ornamental. It was used because it's got a pretty little purple flower. But when the Irish people were starving, they figured it'd be better to die quick by eating a poisonous plant than to starve to death, and so they started eating potatoes, and lo and behold, they got bigger and stronger. The lowly potato also changed warfare and the entire system. The lowly potato led to the Industrial Revolution. It might not have happened without the fact that now a family wasn't dependent upon the duke and the baron and everything that controlled their acreage, but they could grow enough potatoes in their backyard to feed the family during the winter. You could also leave potatoes in the ground if they didn't freeze hard. And so it slowed armies down if they had to, instead of going from granary to granary, they had to go from potato patch to potato patch. So it changed everything. Created up a workforce that ended up in the factories that ended up with the Industrial Revolution. So question these things, wonder, be curious. Why did that happen? How did it happen? Question your assumptions, although now I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to assume that the reason that you all are here is because you're seeking a college degree. I say congratulations. That's what my passion in life is assisting people like you to acquire that degree. Or if not that degree, whatever makes you happy. I'm one of those parents that tried to push, shove, cajole, intimidate my children into going to college. I believed in it wholeheartedly. My son resisted every attempt. He is currently a Harley-Davidson mechanic and happier than a lot of people I know that went to college. So find what makes you excited. Discover that thing that you have passion for. Unpack it and own it. Remember that one size never fits all. If I could give you one of my lectures on American Indian culture, it can be condensed into one word: diversity. We were one of the most diverse populations the earth has ever seen. We spoke over 600 languages at the time that Columbus accidentally stumbled into the Caribbean, and he did not discover America. So yes, I am an anti-Columbus Day. Not one path works for everybody. I came into my position in a very circuitous way. I'm one of those students that went right straight to college. Right out of high school, 17 years old, I was in a college classroom. I was emotionally 13. I used to tell people I had a 3.0. This is a story. This is made up. This isn't really true. But I used to always tell my students that I always thought I had a 3.0 because there was a point in like 3 zeros. It was a little better than that, but not a great deal. I was a miserable student, didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew one thing, that I had a severe math disability, and although I love math, and I refer frequently to A plus B equals C, and A plus B is like pi. There is an infinite number of variations that you can put into A and B to still equal C. Why is that important? Because there is an infinite number of ways you can get to where you want to be. I highly encourage you to find the way that fits you, because that's the only way you're ever going to be happy. When I came back to the university, I came back to be recertified. I wanted to be a certified teacher, so I came back to certify. One of the classes I had to take was anthropology, and it was in a room like this, 360 people. I had to sit down front because I've got really bad eyesight and really poor hearing. But I asked questions. Hint, if you want to do better in college, sit up front, ask questions. And I really wish somebody would have told me this when I was a freshman out of high school. Read the book. It really helps pass the exams. They got to know me. The professor called me in one day, and he had a group of students that were international students, and he wanted somebody to tutor them. And he said, "You have the least Eurocentric perspective of any student I've had in 40 years. Would you tutor them?" When I went to college, I said I would be anything but a teacher the first time. I discovered that that's where I'm the happiest. That's why I say, unpack things and question, because the thing you think you hate may be the thing you love. And so, came back, found those things that I liked, and graduated summa cum laude. So, hang in there, find out what it is you want. So, back in my journey, why do we care about diversity? We're going to get into these whys. Because diversity is what makes the world sparkle. And please don't ever confuse diversity with ethnicity. They're not the same thing. Diversity is about physical abilities, it's about age, it's about weight, it's about gender, it's about ethnicity, it's about all of those. And a world without diversity is a glass of milk. It's not very colorful. And inclusion. Why do we care about inclusion? Because no one should be left outside. No one should have the doors shut on them. Inclusion makes us all better. I recently met with a bunch of business headhunters that were coming into the university looking for good candidates to place in their jobs. And we're talking Microsoft, Apple, all of these big companies. And their statement was, we care a whole lot less where you get the degree. That's not important. Your GPA is not as important as, are you inclusive? Can you think creatively and critically? And can you work collaboratively? So just a hint, if you want to get a high-paying job, inclusion, collaboration, creativity, curiosity. See, I can always come up with 4. Those are things that you need to do. You need to know why you're here. You need to question everything. Unpack it. Think of things that we think about just every day. And I'm going to get into some cultural differences here. For example, time. Traditionally, my language had no word for time. Because despite what we're taught, you're wasting my time. You can't really own it. Time is fleeting. Well, let's look at some quantum physics, and it has different movement. be on time. If I ask one of you, what time is it right now? And you answered back, it's 1:45. You're wrong. It isn't. Because by the time you can look at your watch and process it in your mind and speak it, it's already 40 seconds beyond that. We are never on time. We are always behind time because our brain doesn't process so that we can be ever on time. It's a virtual coming together. So throw away some of these things and think about them. Think about the most common things you ever do or say every day and try to unpack them. I'm jumping around. I'm not even on my notes. Some other cultural differences that I've been profoundly blessed to grow up with are things like, how do you collaborate? How do you work with other people? How do you appreciate the gifts that other people have? Because everybody has a gift. I'm not saying that there's no good and no evil on earth. There is evil. But even in that, I question, how did we get to that point where this happens? So my big question is always, why? I got here by luck, not by talent in any way. I love what I'm doing. A good day for me is in a room full of young people. They keep me young, they encourage me, they make my life brighter. I am eternally blessed that I was offered the opportunity to come to Utah and live and work in Utah. I hope to stay here for a long time. One of the things that I usually do at the beginning, and I'm going to close with this, is it is important for me to place myself in this unpacked, off-center stage and understand, and I hope that you all come to this point someday to understand, that none of us are here through any great gift of ours. There is nothing I've ever accomplished and nothing I've ever done that wasn't based on the fact that I have ancestors 7 generations before me, whose name I don't even know, that lived, struggled, fought, persevered, and died to allow me the opportunity to be here, to do the same thing for a great-great-great-great-great-grandchild that I will never know or will never know me. We are here because of those that went before us. It's a common thing that we stand, if we have any greatness, it's because we stand on the shoulders of those that were greater. I want to acknowledge all the 4s of my life. Like I said earlier, we divide everything into 4. There's 4 groups of people on earth. There's 4 ages of life. There's 4 sacred colors. Our sacred colors for my nation is in this order: red, yellow, black, white. There are 4 sacred plants. There are 4 sacred elements: fire, air, earth, and water. Those are the 4 things that comprise a human. In our origin stories, we were told from time immemorial that we were the people with a like heart. We are the people that arrived on this place as stardust that fell from the sky. We now know that human beings are actually stardust that fell to the earth. There's 4 duties in our life: to be respectful, to be responsible, to be helpful, and to give back. So in closing, and I think I'm probably pretty close to my time, I hope. I haven't been watching my clock here very well, and I would like to open it up to questions, is question everything. I encourage you to question me. Do what is necessary. Do what is necessary to complete your journey. and your journey will become easier. Please be kind to others. Don't judge. Find joy in what you do, and I guarantee you, you will find success. Nayesh. Questions? Please? Yes?
So you said the sacred colors of your nation are red, yellow, black, and white. What do those symbolize?
You have to be able to visualize a wheel. And you're going to cut it into 4 pieces. And then you're going to kind of tip it, because we don't do cardinal direction. They don't really exist. So they represent the 4 ages of life. They represent those 4 sacred elements. It's the composite of everything that makes up humans. So east is where the sun rises. That's where babies come into the world, is from the east. Their souls arrive from the east. The south is where you're a child. That's where you learn all your knowledge. Going to the east would be as an adult. That's where you have all of your work, where you take care of everyone else. And as an elder, you're back to the point where babies come into the world, and the elder's wisdom and spirit is what brings the new life into the world and greets it. So it's everything. It's the 4 seasons, spring, and the colors relate to that. So you've got spring, summer, winter, or spring, summer, fall, winter. It's the seasons that control everything, although they move smoothly between each other. So it's a metaphor for everything in life. It's your job of what you do. You get to play, you get to learn, you get to protect, and you get to teach. So it's a little bit of everything. And that's only for mine, because other people switch the colors. The medicine wheel, the concept of the circle, which is actually a spiral, is pretty universal in the Americas, in the American Indian culture. But colors will vary and plants will vary. Our 4 sacred plants are cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and tobacco. And tobacco was used as a blessing, not as recreational smoking. Tobacco was something you left to be blessed. The others were purifiers. Other questions? Yes? It's the 4 regions, so it would be, I hate to put it into colors, but black, white, red, and yellow would be the 4 big divisions. But none of those matter. I mean, as a forensic anthropologist, again, you can't divide people into those, even though as an anthropologist, if when I'm doing osteology and looking at a skull, I'm going to try to give it some characteristics. But in any one of those categories, like white, Anglo, Caucasian, there is more diversity than between any of them. And so the concept of ethnicity, race is absolutely a social construction. It does not exist, other than we have constructed it to be that way. And so there's more variation in the whole group than between a group. Yes, sir. Story-wise, we always knew they were there. In our origin stories that predate colonization, we have these stories of the 4 different peoples of the world. Although it's controversial and it's difficult to prove, we know that 1,000 years prior to Columbus, Vikings were in Canada. That can be proven. There are areas in Colorado that they've found glass floats that from the glass appears to have been about 1,800 years before Columbus that were manufactured in Japan or China from the factories there, because you can pretty well fingerprint some of this stuff. I believe that there was massive, or at least some, traveling back and forth and trade prior to colonization. Chickens in South America that are pre-colonial have Polynesian connections in their DNA. So I think there was a lot of movement before that, and it just stayed in our stories. Another good example is there's a plant called mullein, and we use it to correct asthma. When Lewis and Clark came west, they saw no mullein west of the Mississippi. When Thwaites came through 22 years later, it was being used by almost all the Plains tribes to treat asthma. Now, inhaling smoke to treat asthma seems counterintuitive. However, the smoke does contain a bronchodilator. How did they discover this in less than 20 years? I don't have a good answer, but it was, they did. I wish I knew. Yes?
A question about the difference between hunting in Native American culture and hunting in Utah. Can you talk a little bit about the implications of killing an animal, leaving its body, etc.?
There is absolutely no concept of sport hunting in traditional culture. If you were going to go take an animal, the belief is that it's impossible, especially with a bow and arrow, it's impossible to take an animal that the animal did not offer itself to you. And so because this animal has made the ultimate sacrifice to save you and your family, you pray to it, you thank it, you bless it, and you use everything right down to the hooves. Nothing is left. Sport hunting, you look for the horns only. But there is a respect. You would never take something. As a child, I used to see my father tag animals that somebody else had shot and taken the horns and left just so it would not waste. And it's an ethos that I was raised with, that you don't waste anything. As some of the vegetables in their little green fur coats in my refrigerator will attest to. That you don't waste it, don't throw it out, you got to keep it till it leaves by itself.
I have a question. I go to the University of Utah, and in that I get to learn a different history that is taught in like normal school because I'm a social work major. And yesterday we learned about in the 1960s the AIM,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not taught. And you said question everything, and I was just thinking, what is your thought on like the history that we're taught in school and how a lot of this is covered up? Like they talk about Watergate, but nobody knows about the federal standoff and the children being ripped out of the reservations and being adopted and put in orphanages in the 1960s, you know?
Well, not exactly. In 1879, a Civil War and Indian War veteran opened something called the Indian boarding schools, the off-reservation boarding school. And from 1879 until 1950, American Indians did not have the right to refuse to have their children taken. And so in that period, every child from the age of 4 on up was removed from the home and placed in boarding schools. There were boarding schools in Utah. In the 1950s, 1934 was the first time that American Indians were allowed to have some government, but it was on a template. You had to follow the Constitution, etc. As we move into the 60s and 70s with the AIM protests and other protests following the civil rights, people began to demand more self-governance. And in the 1980s on up, they keep pushing for self-determination and self-governance. The thing that most people don't understand is the reason that American Indian tribes are treated somewhat uniquely is because we are mentioned in the United States Constitution as individual sovereign nations. And so the federal government has an obligation to work with Native nations on a government-to-government basis, just as they would with England or any other government. It's been greatly eroded since then, and we're still working on it. But those are some of the issues. But it was in the 1870s that kids were removed. In the 1960s, tribes started taking over the boarding schools. It was different in Canada. In Canada, the boarding schools were run by churches, and there's very many boarding schools in Canada where 100% of the children that went there were sexually molested or raped. But why is it not taught? Because that's painful. It's very difficult for people to say that those people back then did some bad things, because we're going to say, why? Why did you have this superiority complex that you thought you could do it? And it's hard for us to recognize that someone in our past could have done something like that. It's just painful. United States history is pitifully taught. It's taught with an agenda. I mean, there's history books. They're just, I don't know if you have seen this out there on the news or not, but there are history books that identify slavery as mass immigration from Africa for job opportunities. It actually says that in a book that's used in elementary schools in the South. So why do we tolerate it? I don't know. Because there's so much history. They have to focus on something. But it would be nice to acknowledge the first people that were here. It's like when people talk about when they came into Utah, when the first LDS pioneers came into Utah. Well, they didn't. They came into northeast Mexico, because this wasn't taken into the United States for another 2 years. But you never hear that. It's, we build pictures that are palatable for us to eat. Scalping didn't come from American Indians. It was introduced by the British. That's why so many American Indians find the term redskin problematic, because it's rouged flesh. It's talking about a bounty that was placed on men, women, and children. In my office, I have an actual copy of one of the bounty posters where it was 40 shillings for a male, half of that for a female, and half of that for an infant, a child. And the only way you could tell if it was man, woman, or child was by the hairstyle, and so you scalped them. Up until in the 1980s, in 1989, it was discovered that through Indian Health Services, 144,000 American Indian women had been sterilized against their will and without their knowledge. But you're right, these things are never approached in our history classes. That's why you have to ask why. See, I'm going to throw it back on all of you. That's why you have to question everything. Other questions? Yes?
Where have you traveled?
Where have I traveled? I've been everywhere, boys. No. There's 3 states I haven't been in the United States. I've been to Iceland, Finland, Germany, Poland, Denmark, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland. I had to go to Switzerland for the UN, and I had to travel through a bunch of these places. France. That's about it. That's all. Got lots more to go to. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.